David Chen had been the CEO of Megamart Distribution for 7 years. His office sat on the 23rd floor of a glass tower in downtown Chicago, where the coffee was always hot and the view was always perfect. He knew every number in every quarterly report. He could tell you the profit margins down to the decimal point, but he couldn't tell you the names of the people who actually moved the boxes that made those profits possible. That bothered him more than he wanted to admit. The idea came to him during a board meeting when someone mentioned employee satisfaction scores. They were dropping, but nobody seemed to know why. The HR director suggested another survey. The operations manager blamed lazy workers. David sat there thinking about how disconnected they all were from the actual warehouses where the real work happened, so he made a decision that his assistant called crazy. He was going undercover. 2 weeks later, David stood in front of a mirror in a cheap motel room, barely recognizing himself. Gone was the $1,500 suit. Instead, he wore a plain blue work shirt and canvas pants from a discount store. He'd grown out his beard and wore a baseball cap pulled low. His expensive watch was locked in a safe back home, replaced by a $20 digital one. He looked like a completely different person. His fake resume said his name was Mike Torres, recently moved from Texas, looking for steady work. The warehouse manager hadn't even interviewed him properly, just told him to show up Monday night for the overnight shift. Apparently, they were always short on janitors. The warehouse was nothing like the sanitized corporate presentations David had seen. The fluorescent lights hummed and flickered. The concrete floor was stained and cracked. It smelled like cardboard, sweat, and industrial cleaner. The break room had 2 vending machines, both half empty, and a microwave that looked older than some of the employees. His supervisor was a tired-looking man named Pete, who barely glanced at him during the 5-minute orientation. You clean the bathrooms, break rooms, and offices. Empty the trash. Mop the floors. Stay out of the way of the warehouse crews. Questions? David shook his head. Good, you get 2 15-minute breaks and a 30-minute lunch. Clock's over there. Don't be late. Pete walked away before David could respond. The first few hours were humbling. David had never mopped a floor in his life. His back ached. His hands hurt from wringing out the dirty mop water. He'd built this company thinking about strategy and growth and market share, but he'd never once thought about the person who had to clean the bathroom at 2 in the morning. Around 11 o'clock, he pushed his cleaning cart toward the employee break room. Most workers were out on the floor, loading trucks or managing inventory. The break room was supposed to be empty at this hour, but it wasn't. A woman stood at the sink with her back to him. She was bent over, her arms moving in a scrubbing motion. At first, David thought she was washing dishes. Then he saw the small pile of clothes on the counter next to her, a child's school uniform. Navy blue pants and a white polo shirt with a stain on the collar. She was washing her kids' clothes in the break room sink. David froze, unsure what to do. He could back out quietly, pretend he hadn't seen anything, but something about the way her shoulders were shaking made him pause. She wasn't just washing clothes. She was crying. The water ran hot over her hands as she scrubbed the shirt against itself, trying to work out the stain. Her work vest hung on the back of a chair, and David could see her name badge. Jennifer Lopez. The name made him think of the famous singer for a split second, but this Jennifer looked nothing like a celebrity. She looked exhausted. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. David cleared his throat softly. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Jennifer jumped, spinning around. Her eyes were red and puffy. She quickly wiped her face with the back of her hand, leaving a wet streak across her cheek. No, I'm sorry. I'll get out of your way. I know you need to clean. It's okay. Take your time. David moved slowly into the room, keeping his distance. He could see now that she was younger than he'd first thought. Maybe late 20s. Her hands were red and raw from the hot water. Jennifer turned back to the sink, her movements faster now, almost frantic. I'm almost done. Just give me 2 minutes. David started emptying the trash can, trying to seem busy while not actually interrupting her. But he kept watching out of the corner of his eye. She was wringing out the shirt now, twisting it so hard her knuckles turned white. Then she laid it on the counter and started on the pants. Washing machine broken? David asked quietly. Jennifer's hands stilled for just a moment. Yeah, 3 weeks ago. That's rough. Repair guy coming? She let out a bitter laugh. Can't afford a repair guy. Can't afford a new one either, so... She gestured at the sink. "This is what I've got." David felt something twist in his chest. This woman worked for his company. She spent her nights in this warehouse doing hard physical labor, and she couldn't afford to fix her washing machine. What about a laundromat? Have you seen the prices at those places? Jennifer's voice cracked slightly. $8 a load, plus detergent, plus the time, and I'd have to take my son with me because I can't afford a babysitter on top of everything else. It's easier to just... She trailed off, scrubbing harder at a stubborn spot. David grabbed some paper towels from his cart and set them on the counter next to her, for drying them off. Thanks. She didn't look at him. You're new, right? I haven't seen you before. Started tonight. I'm Mike, Jennifer. But everyone calls me Jen. She pulled the pants out of the sink and wrung them out. Water splashed onto the floor. Sorry about the mess, don't worry about it. I'm the janitor, remember? David tried to sound light, but his mind was racing. How many other employees were struggling like this? How had he never known? Jen laid the pants next to the shirt and pressed them with her hands, trying to squeeze out more water. My son has picture day tomorrow. Well, today, I guess. It's already past midnight. He's 7 and he's so excited about it. But yesterday at recess, some kid pushed him in the mud, and this was his only clean uniform. I couldn't send him to picture day looking like that. She said it all matter-of-factly, like it was normal to be washing clothes in a break room sink in the middle of the night. Like this was just life and she was doing what needed to be done. Your break must be almost over, David said. Jen glanced at the clock and cursed under her breath. Yeah, I've got 3 minutes. She grabbed the paper towels and started blotting the clothes frantically. These won't be dry by morning, but maybe if I hang them in front of the space heater at home. She bundled the damp clothes into a plastic grocery bag, shoving them down to fit. Her hands were shaking slightly. Whether from cold or stress or exhaustion, David couldn't tell. Probably all three. You okay? The question came out before David could stop it. Jen looked at him for the first time, really looked at him. Her eyes were brown and deeply tired, but there was something fierce in them too. A determination that refused to break despite everything. Yeah, I'm fine. Just another night, you know? She grabbed her vest and shrugged it on, then picked up the plastic bag. As she walked past him toward the door, David noticed she was limping slightly. Hey, are you hurt? Old shoes, blisters, it's fine. Jen paused at the doorway and looked back. Hey, Mike. Don't tell Pete about this, okay? About the clothes. He's already looking for reasons to write people up. And I can't afford to lose this job. I won't say anything, David promised. She gave him a small, grateful nod and disappeared into the warehouse. David stood alone in the break room, staring at the wet sink. A few drops of water still clung to the edges, catching the harsh fluorescent light. He thought about his own son, who was probably sleeping soundly in his bedroom right now. His son who had a closet full of clean clothes, who'd never had to worry about picture day or stained uniforms or whether his mom could afford the laundromat. David pulled out his phone, then remembered he wasn't supposed to have a smartphone. Mike Torres, the janitor, wouldn't have an iPhone. He'd specifically bought a cheap flip phone for this undercover assignment. But old habits died hard. He put the phone away and went back to mopping. But his mind wasn't on the floors anymore. It was on Jen, on her red raw hands and her determination to make sure her son had a clean uniform for picture day. It was on the fact that she worked here, in his company, in his warehouse, and he'd created a system where she couldn't afford a $300 washing machine repair. The rest of the shift passed slowly. David cleaned bathrooms and emptied trash and mopped floors, but part of his attention was always on the warehouse floor, looking for Jen. He saw her a few times in the distance, moving between rows of shelves with a scanner in hand, checking inventory. She moved fast despite the limp, despite the exhaustion. She never stopped moving. At 6 in the morning, when the shift ended, David saw her clock out. She walked to the parking lot, and he watched through the window as she got into an old Honda with a dented bumper and a missing hubcap. The car coughed when she started it, sputtering before the engine finally turned over. Then she drove away into the gray morning light, probably heading home to hang her son's damp clothes in front of a space heater and catch a few hours of sleep before getting him ready for school. David sat in his own car for a long time before starting it. He thought about going back to his penthouse apartment, to his comfortable bed and his expensive coffee maker and his closet full of clothes he never thought twice about. He thought about Jen, washing her son's uniform in a break room sink, using her break time to do what needed to be done because She had no other choice, and he realized that all those numbers in all those quarterly reports didn't mean anything if they were built on people who couldn't afford to fix their washing machines, people who worked overnight shifts until their feet bled and still couldn't make ends meet, people who cried over a sink while scrubbing out mud stains because they wanted their kid to look good for picture day. David started his car and drove home through the empty streets. But something had changed. He couldn't unsee what he'd seen, and he knew somewhere deep in his gut that this was just the beginning. If Jen was struggling this much, how many others were too? He needed to find out. Not as David Chen, CEO of Megamart Distribution, but as Mike Torres, the new janitor who nobody looked at twice. The invisible man who could see everything. David couldn't stop thinking about Jennifer. He went home that first morning and tried to sleep. But every time he closed his eyes, he saw her hands scrubbing that shirt in the sink. He saw the way her shoulders shook. He heard her voice saying just another night like struggling was normal. He'd built a career on understanding businesses, on analyzing data and making strategic decisions. But lying in his expensive bed that morning, staring at the ceiling, he realized he didn't understand anything about the people who actually made his business run. The second night, he arrived at the warehouse early. He wanted to observe, to really see what was happening. Pete handed him a mop and pointed to the loading dock area. "Spill in Bay 3. Clean it up before the trucks come." David headed out to the warehouse floor with his cart. The space was enormous, rows and rows of shelving stretching up toward the ceiling. Forklifts beeped as they moved between aisles. Workers with scanners called out numbers to each other. The place hummed with activity. He found the spill and started mopping. And that's when he noticed something. From where he stood, invisible in his janitor uniform, he could see everything. People walked past him without a second glance. They talked to each other like he wasn't there. It was like being a ghost, and he saw Jennifer. She was working in an aisle about 50 feet away, scanning boxes and checking them against a tablet. Even from a distance, David could see she was moving slower than the night before. Her limp was worse. She kept pausing to shift her weight from one foot to the other. A younger guy walked past her, headphones in, moving at half her speed. He stopped to check his phone every few minutes. Jennifer never stopped. She worked through her discomfort, through the pain in her feet, scanning box after box with mechanical efficiency. David finished the spill and moved closer, pretending to check trash cans. He wanted to understand her situation better. Not because he was being nosy, but because he genuinely needed to know what his employees were dealing with. During the midnight lunch break, he saw Jennifer in the break room again. This time she wasn't washing clothes. She was sitting alone at a corner table, surrounded by papers. Her lunch was a peanut butter sandwich in a plastic bag, and a bottle of water from the vending machine. That was it. David grabbed his own lunch from the cart and sat a few tables away. He'd packed a sandwich too, trying to fit in. From where he sat, he could see the papers spread out in front of Jennifer. Bills, past due notices, a spreadsheet with numbers scribbled in the margins. She ate her sandwich in small bites, chewing slowly while staring at the papers. Her finger traced down a column of numbers, her lips moving silently as she calculated something. Then she dropped her head into her hands and just sat there. David wanted to say something, to offer help, but he didn't know how. As Mike the janitor, what could he possibly do? As David the CEO, he could change everything. But right now he was Mike, and Mike had to stay quiet and observe. Jennifer's phone buzzed. She looked at it and sighed deeply before answering. "Hey, Mrs. Patterson, I know. I'm sorry. I'll have it by Friday, I promise." A pause. "Yes, I understand. Friday, I won't be late again. Thank you for being patient with me." She hung up and rubbed her eyes. Then she carefully folded all the papers, put them back in her bag, and threw away her sandwich wrapper. She still had 15 minutes left of her break, but she got up and headed back to the floor. David followed at a distance. He watched her clock back in early and returned to her aisle. She moved even faster now, as if pushing herself harder would somehow solve the problems waiting in that stack of bills. Over the next week, David learned more about Jennifer just by watching. She always volunteered when Pete asked for someone to stay late. She never complained, even when other workers grumbled about the workload. She helped train new people without being asked, showing them the most efficient ways to scan and sort. But he also noticed things that bothered him, like the way the warehouse manager, a guy named Rick Thompson, seemed to treat her differently. Rick was in his 40s, always walking around with a clipboard and a frown. He was quick to criticize and slow to praise. One night, David was emptying trash near Rick's office when he overheard a conversation. The door was partially open and Rick was talking to someone on the phone. "Yeah, Jennifer Lopez, she's asking about the supervisor position again." Rick laughed. "I told her we'd let her know, but between you and me, no way. Single mom? Kid with health problems? She'll be calling out constantly. We need someone reliable." David felt his jaw clench. He wanted to march in there and tell Rick exactly what he thought of that attitude, but he couldn't. Not yet, he kept listening. "She's been here 2 years, sure, but that doesn't mean anything. I've got 3 other candidates who don't have all that baggage. Look, I'm not saying she's a bad worker. She's fine. But supervisor? That's a leadership role. We need someone focused." The conversation continued, but David had heard enough. He walked away, his mind racing. Jennifer was being passed over for promotions because she was a single mom, because her son had health issues. Things that had nothing to do with her actual work performance. This wasn't just about low wages anymore. This was discrimination hiding behind corporate speak and polite excuses. That night, during his break, David sat in the break room and really looked around. He started paying attention to the other workers. The woman who heated up instant ramen for dinner every night because it was cheap. The older man who fell asleep during his break because he worked 2 jobs. The young guy who kept all his belongings in his car because he was technically homeless. These weren't just employees. They were people barely holding on, working exhausting jobs that still didn't pay enough to cover basic needs. He thought about the last board meeting, where they'd discussed cutting labor costs by another 2%. 2%. It had seemed like such a small number in the conference room. But down here, 2% meant someone couldn't afford to fix their washing machine. It meant someone chose between dinner and gas money. It meant someone worked until their feet bled because they couldn't risk losing their job. David started talking to people more. Not interrogating them, just making conversation the way coworkers do. He learned that the starting wage at the warehouse hadn't increased in 4 years. He learned that the health insurance was so expensive most workers couldn't afford it. He learned that the promised bonuses for meeting targets somehow never materialized. He also learned that Jennifer wasn't just respected by her coworkers. She was loved. When new people looked confused or overwhelmed, they sought her out. When someone needed to switch shifts for an emergency, Jennifer was usually the one who covered. When the vending machine ate someone's last dollar, Jennifer would share whatever she had. One night, David saw a young woman crying in the bathroom hallway. Jennifer was with her, one hand on her shoulder, talking quietly. "It's going to be okay, Amy. We'll figure it out. Let me talk to Pete about your schedule. Maybe we can shift some things around." The young woman, Amy, wiped her nose. "My daughter's sick again and the daycare won't take her. I already missed 2 days this month. If I miss another, Rick said he'd write me up. He's not going to write you up. Your kid is sick. That's life. Anyone who doesn't understand that has never been a parent." Jennifer dug in her pocket and pulled out a $20 bill. "Here, get some medicine for your daughter." "Jen, no. I can't take your money." "You're not taking it. I'm giving it. Pay me back when you can or don't, it doesn't matter." Amy took the money with trembling hands. "Thank you. I'll pay you back, I promise." After Amy left, Jennifer stood there for a moment, leaning against the wall. She looked exhausted. David stayed hidden around the corner, but he'd seen everything. Jennifer, who was washing clothes in the sink because she couldn't afford the laundromat, had just given away $20. That moment changed something in David. He'd seen generous people before. He'd written checks to charities. He'd attended fundraising galas in $1,000 suits. But he'd never seen generosity like this. Generosity that cost something real. Generosity from someone who had almost nothing to give. He made a decision then. He needed to know more. Not just about Jennifer, but about how she'd ended up in this situation. About why a good worker with 2 years of experience was still struggling to survive. The next night, he found his opportunity. Jennifer's car wouldn't start after the shift ended. David watched from his own car as she tried the ignition over and over. The engine would turn but wouldn't catch. Other workers drove past her, some waving, but no one stopped. David got out and walked over. "Car trouble?" Jennifer looked up, frustration written all over her face. "Yeah, it's been making weird noises all week. I was hoping it would last a little longer. Want me to take a look?" "You know cars?" David knew expensive cars. He knew which luxury brand had the best features, but he didn't know how to fix a dying Honda with 200,000 miles on it. Still, he popped the hood and looked inside like he had a clue. Might be the battery. Or the starter. Hard to say. Great. Jennifer laughed, but there was no humor in it. I just paid the rent. I've got maybe $40 until next Friday. A tow truck costs more than that. You got someone who can pick you up? At 6 in the morning? My neighbor watches my son, but she's 73. I can't ask her to drive out here. I'll figure it out. I always do. David wanted to tell her he'd give her a ride, but Mike the janitor didn't have any reason to still be in the parking lot. He'd already punched out 20 minutes ago. Maybe try calling the supervisor. Company might have a policy for stuff like this. Jennifer shook her head. Rick, he'd tell me it's not his problem. Which it isn't, I guess. This is my mess. She pulled out her phone and started scrolling. David could see her checking ride prices, watching her face fall as the numbers came up. $60, $70. One even said $85 because of the early morning surge pricing. Finally, she called someone. Hey, Tony? Yeah, I know it's early. I'm so sorry. My car died at work and I need to get home before Danny wakes up. Can you come get me? A long pause. Maple Street Warehouse off Highway 41, thank you. I owe you one. She hung up and leaned against her dead car. My ex-boyfriend. We're still friends, sort of. He works nights too, so he's awake. That's good. Yeah. Except now I owe him a favor, and with Tony, favors always come with strings attached. She said it quietly, like she was talking to herself more than to David. They stood there in awkward silence. The sun was starting to come up, painting the sky pink and orange. In any other context, it might have been beautiful. But here, in this cracked parking lot with Jennifer worrying about her dead car and her son, and the favors she'd have to repay, the sunrise just felt cruel. You've worked here 2 years, right? David asked. Yeah, 2 years next month. You like it? Jennifer looked at him like he'd asked the strangest question. Like it? I mean, it's a job. It pays the bills. Most of them, anyway. It's steady, and I need steady. Ever think about doing something else? All the time. I wanted to be a nurse. Took some classes at community college before I got pregnant with Danny. But then his dad left and I had to drop out and find work. I keep thinking maybe someday I'll go back, finish my degree. But between work and Danny and everything else, she trailed off. It's just a dream, I guess. A car pulled into the parking lot. Old Chevy, primer spots on the hood. A guy with a sleeve of tattoos got out. Jen, what happened? Tony, thanks for coming. Car finally gave up on me. Tony looked at the Honda and whistled. Yeah, she's done. I told you last month you needed to get that looked at. I know.
Can we just go?
I need to get home before Danny wakes up. David watched them drive away. Jennifer in the passenger seat, probably feeling grateful and worried and indebted all at the same time. He sat in his own car, a luxury sedan that cost more than Jennifer probably made in a year, and felt sick to his stomach. He drove home that morning with a new sense of purpose. He'd seen enough. He'd learned enough. Jennifer wasn't just struggling because of bad luck or poor choices. She was struggling because the system was designed to keep her struggling. Low wages, no opportunities for advancement. A manager who saw her family responsibilities as weaknesses instead of evidence of her strength and reliability. And David Chen, CEO of Mega Mart Distribution, had built that system. It was time to start tearing it down. David spent his days now doing something he'd never done before. He was reading his own company's employee handbook. Not skimming it during a meeting. Actually reading it word by word like someone who desperately needed to understand their benefits and rights. What he found shocked him. There was an emergency loan program. Employees could borrow up to $2,000 interest-free for unexpected expenses. There was tuition assistance up to $5,000 a year for approved courses. There was even a transportation assistance fund for employees whose cars broke down. All of these programs existed. David had approved them himself 3 years ago during a corporate responsibility initiative. But as he sat in his home office scrolling through the company intranet, he realized something horrible. These programs were buried, hidden behind login pages that warehouse workers probably never accessed, written in corporate language that made them sound complicated and exclusive. He opened his laptop and searched for the warehouse employee portal. It took him 15 minutes and 3 different password resets to even find the right page. When he finally got in, he understood why nobody used these resources. The interface looked like it hadn't been updated since 2010. The information was scattered across different sections with no clear navigation. Even he, with a business degree from Harvard, found it confusing. The emergency loan application required 3 forms of documentation, 2 supervisor signatures, and a written explanation of need. The process took minimum 2 weeks. For someone like Jennifer, whose car broke down and needed immediate help, 2 weeks might as well be 2 years. The tuition assistance was even worse. It only covered pre-approved programs at pre-approved schools. Community college classes weren't on the list. The application deadline was February 1st for the following academic year. If you missed it, you waited another year, and nobody had ever told the warehouse workers about it. David picked up his phone and called his HR director. Then he remembered he was supposed to be undercover. He put the phone down. He needed to see this through to understand the full scope of the problem before he started fixing things. That night at the warehouse, he paid closer attention to everything. Not just Jennifer, but the whole operation. He started noticing patterns that made his blood boil. The warehouse ran 3 shifts. Night shift, the one David worked, paid the same as day shift. But night shift was harder, more exhausting, and messed up your sleep schedule. There was no differential pay for working overnight. No incentive at all, except that it was easier to get hired for night shift because nobody wanted it. Break times were strictly monitored. 15 minutes meant 15 minutes from the moment you clocked out to the moment you clocked back in. But the break room was a 5-minute walk from some parts of the warehouse. So really, workers got 5 minutes to actually rest. Pete, the supervisor, would literally time people and write them up if they were even 2 minutes late getting back. The warehouse was hot in summer and cold in winter. The company had installed ceiling fans, but half of them didn't work. There was one space heater in the break room that everyone fought over during winter months. David had personally approved a $15 million renovation for the corporate office last year, including a state-of-the-art climate control system. But down here, workers wore coats indoors during January. He watched Rick Thompson, the warehouse manager, patrol the floor like a prison guard. Rick had this way of watching workers that made everyone nervous. He'd stand at the end of an aisle with his arms crossed, just staring. If someone slowed down even a little, he'd make a note on his clipboard. David saw him approach a young guy named Kevin who was moving boxes. "You're at 82% productivity today, Kevin. Target is 95. You need to pick up the pace." Kevin, who looked exhausted, just nodded. "Yes, sir." "Sorry, sir, don't be sorry. Be faster." Rick walked away, leaving Kevin standing there looking defeated. David wanted to throw his mop bucket at Rick's head. Instead, he kept cleaning and watching. During his lunch break, he sat near a group of workers who were talking quietly. He recognized them as people who'd been there for years. "Veterans of the warehouse, did you hear Rodriguez finally quit?" one woman said. "Just walked out middle of his shift last week." "Can't blame him," another replied. His wife had a baby and they wouldn't give him more than 2 days off. 2 days? For a newborn baby. Company policy. Warehouse workers get 2 days paternity leave. Office workers get 2 weeks, and that's insane. That's Megamart. David sat very still, pretending to eat his sandwich. He hadn't known that. He'd approved a generous parental leave policy 2 years ago. 2 weeks paid leave for any parent regardless of gender. But apparently warehouse workers had been excluded. Someone in HR had decided they didn't qualify for the same benefits as office staff. The conversation continued. "I put in for vacation in June. Requested it back in January. Rick denied it yesterday. Said too many people already requested that week. He approved Brian's vacation for that same week. I saw it on the schedule. Yeah, but Brian plays poker with Rick every Thursday. If you're not in Rick's inner circle, forget it. I'm so tired of this place, but what else am I gonna do? I'm 53 years old. No college degree. Who's gonna hire me? Same boat. Got a kid in high school. Need the insurance, even though it's garbage. Can't risk starting over somewhere else." David felt each word like a physical blow. These were good people, loyal employees, and they felt trapped. Stuck in a system that didn't value them, managed by someone who played favorites with no clear path to anything better. He thought about his own career path. Ivy League education paid for by his parents. Entry-level job at a consulting firm where he made more than these workers made now. Rapid promotions based on merit and connections. He'd worked hard, sure, but he'd also had every advantage. Every door had been open to him. These workers had different doors. Doors that were locked or hidden or led nowhere. After lunch, David was cleaning near Rick's office again when he heard voices. Rick was meeting with someone. David slowed down, taking his time wiping down a nearby table. "Look, I know Jennifer Lopez has been asking about the supervisor position," a woman's voice said. It sounded like Helen from HR. "But we can't keep passing her over. She's got seniority. Her performance reviews are excellent. If she files a complaint, we could have a problem. So we'll make up a reason," Rick said casually. "Say she doesn't have leadership qualities. Or that we need someone with better attendance even though she's never missed a day. There's always a way to justify it." "Rick, I'm serious. This could be seen as discrimination." "Based on what?" "I'm not discriminating. I'm choosing the best candidate for the job. If Jennifer had wanted to be a supervisor, she should have made herself more available. Should have networked better. Should have shown more initiative. She works 60-hour weeks." "Exactly. Which means she's maxed out. A supervisor needs to be able to handle even more responsibility. How's she going to do that with a kid at home?" Helen sighed. "Just be careful how you word the rejection. Use objective criteria. Don't mention her family situation at all." "I know how to do my job, Helen." David gripped his mop handle so hard his knuckles went white. He wanted to burst into that office and fire Rick on the spot. But he couldn't, not yet. He needed evidence. He needed to document everything. He pulled out his cheap flip phone and pretended to check the time, but really he was making notes. Dates, conversations, observations, everything he might need later. That night something happened that crystallized everything for David. It was around 3 a.m, the deadest part of the shift when exhaustion made everything harder. David was cleaning the bathroom when he heard a commotion outside. Voices, urgent and scared. He dropped his mop and ran toward the noise. A crowd had gathered in one of the aisles. In the center, Jennifer was on the ground, sitting with her back against a shelving unit. Her face was pale and sweaty. Her hands were shaking. "I'm fine," she was saying. "I just got dizzy." "I'm fine." "You passed out," someone said. "You were out for like 30 seconds. "I did not pass out. I just needed to sit down." Rick pushed through the crowd. "What's going on here? Why isn't anyone working?" "Jennifer collapsed," Kevin said. "I didn't collapse," Jennifer insisted, trying to stand. Her legs wobbled and someone had to catch her. "I'm fine. Just give me a second." Rick looked annoyed rather than concerned. "When's the last time you ate something?" Jennifer didn't answer. "When?" Rick pressed. "Yesterday at lunch. I had a sandwich. It's 3 a.m. That was almost 18 hours ago. I forgot to pack dinner tonight. It's fine. I'll be okay." Rick shook his head. "You can't work if you're passing out. Go home." Jennifer's eyes went wide with panic. "No, please, I'm fine. I just need some water in 5 minutes. Company policy. If an employee has a medical incident, they have to leave the premises. Rick, please. I need the hours. I can't afford to lose a shift. Not my problem. You should have thought of that before you decided to skip meals. Everyone back to work. Show's over." The crowd dispersed slowly, people throwing worried looks back at Jennifer. David stayed, pretending to clean up some cardboard scraps nearby. Jennifer sat there on the floor, and for the first time since David had met her, she looked completely defeated. Not tired or stressed, but actually broken. Tears rolled down her cheeks and she didn't bother wiping them away. "I can't go home," she whispered to no one in particular. "I need this shift. I need the money." David couldn't stand it anymore. He walked over and crouched down next to her. "Hey, you okay?" "Do I look okay?" She laughed bitterly. "I passed out because I haven't eaten in almost a day. I haven't eaten because I spent my last $20 on medicine for my son. His inhaler ran out and the pharmacy wanted $60 for a refill. Insurance wouldn't cover it until next month. So I bought the inhaler, and now I've got no money for food until Friday. That's 3 days away. I know. I was going to make it work. I had some crackers at home. I was fine, but I gave them to Danny this morning because we were out of cereal and I figured I'd be okay. I've gone hungry before, but I guess my body had other ideas." She tried to stand again and David helped her up. She swayed on her feet. "You need to eat something," David said. "I need to work. Rick's going to send me home and dock my pay for leaving early. That's 4 hours of wages I can't afford to lose. Your health is more important." Jennifer looked at him with eyes that had seen too much struggle. That's easy to say when you have money in the bank. When you're living paycheck to paycheck and behind on every bill and your kid needs things and your car just died, health becomes a luxury. You do what you have to do. She walked slowly toward the exit, one hand on the shelving for balance. David watched her go, watched her clock out, watched her walk to the parking lot where her dead car sat exactly where it had been for 3 days now. He watched her pull out her phone and call someone for a ride. Probably Tony again, another favor owed. And David Chen, standing in his janitor uniform in a warehouse he owned, felt something he'd never felt in all his years of business success. He felt ashamed. Deeply, completely ashamed he'd built this. Not Rick, not Helen, not corporate policy. Him. He was the CEO. He signed off on budgets that gave millions for executive bonuses and pennies for wage increases. He approved policies that treated warehouse workers as expendable. He created a culture where people like Jennifer worked until they literally collapsed and then got punished for it. He looked around the warehouse, at Kevin, pushing himself to hit productivity targets that were probably unrealistic, at the older workers whose bodies were breaking down from years of physical labor, at the young ones who were just starting to realize this job would never give them the life they hoped for. David pulled out his phone. Not the flip phone. His real phone hidden in his locker. He'd kept it locked away, but right now he didn't care about maintaining his cover. He had work to do. Real work. Not the kind that happened in board meetings, but the kind that actually mattered. He started making a list. Everything he'd seen. Everything he'd learned. Everything that needed to change. The list got longer and longer, but one thing was clear in his mind. He couldn't just fix this with policy changes and wage increases. Those things were necessary, but they weren't enough. The real problem was that somewhere along the way, he'd forgotten that workers were people. Real people with real struggles, not just numbers on a productivity chart. Jennifer had just passed out from hunger while making his company money. That wasn't a policy problem. That was a moral failure, and it stopped now. David didn't go home that morning. He sat in his car in the warehouse parking lot, staring at the building as the sun came up. His mind was racing with everything he'd witnessed over the past 2 weeks. Jennifer passing out. The hidden benefits. Rick's discrimination. Workers too scared to speak up, he couldn't wait anymore. He couldn't spend another night pretending to be Mike the janitor while people suffered. But he also knew he couldn't just storm in as the CEO and start firing people. He needed to be smart about this. He needed evidence, and he needed a plan that would actually fix the problems, not just put a Band-Aid on them. He drove to the corporate office. It was early, barely 7 in the morning, but he didn't care. He used his executive key card to get into the building and went straight to his office on the 23rd floor. His assistant, Linda, arrived at 8 and nearly dropped her coffee when she saw him. "Mr. Chen? I thought you were on vacation. You look terrible." "I know." David hadn't shaved in 2 weeks, and he was still wearing his janitor clothes. "Linda, I need you to pull some files for me. HR records for the Maple Street warehouse. All of them. And I need the Employee Benefits Handbook, the actual implementation policies, and any complaints filed in the last 3 years. Linda stared at him. "Is everything okay?" "No, everything is not okay. But it's about to be." She nodded slowly and went to get the files. David sat at his desk, which felt strange after spending 2 weeks mopping floors. Everything in his office suddenly seemed excessive. The leather chair, the mahogany desk, the espresso machine in the corner that cost more than Jennifer made in a month. He opened his computer and started pulling data. Wage information, promotion rates, turnover statistics. The numbers told a story he'd been too blind to see before. Warehouse workers averaged $9.75 an hour. They'd gotten a 25-cent raise 3 years ago. Nothing since. Meanwhile, the cost of living had gone up by 15%. In real terms, his workers were making less now than they were 3 years ago. Promotion rates were even worse. Less than 5% of warehouse workers ever moved into supervisor roles. And when he filtered by gender and parental status, the numbers became damning. Single mothers had a promotion rate of less than 1%. The turnover rate was 60% annually. That meant more than half of warehouse workers quit or were fired every single year. The company spent millions recruiting and training new workers, only to lose them because the conditions were so bad. It was inefficient, cruel, and completely unnecessary. Linda came back with a stack of folders. "These are the files you requested, Mr. Chen. What's going on?" David looked at her. Linda had been with him for 5 years. She was loyal, discreet, and one of the few people in the company he truly trusted. "I've been undercover at the Maple Street warehouse for 2 weeks. What I saw there was unacceptable. We're failing our employees in ways I didn't even know were possible." Linda's eyes widened. "You went undercover?" "As what? A janitor. And I learned more in 2 weeks than I have in 7 years as CEO. Linda, I need you to set up a meeting. Today. With HR, legal, and the operations team. Tell them it's mandatory and urgent. What should I say it's about? Systemic changes to warehouse operations and employee benefits. And Linda, I need you to do something else. Find Jennifer Lopez's employee file. I need her phone number and address." "Sir, I'm not sure I should." "It's not what you think. She had a medical emergency last night at work and was sent home. I need to make sure she's okay." Linda nodded and left to make the calls. David opened the employee complaint files. There were dozens of them from Maple Street warehouse alone. Complaints about favoritism, about unfair scheduling, about denied promotions, about the broken heating system. Every single complaint had the same resolution note. Matter investigated and closed. No violation of company policy found. They were all signed by Rick Thompson. Rick was investigating complaints about himself and finding himself innocent. It would be funny if it wasn't so infuriating. David found Jennifer's file. Her performance reviews were flawless. Exceeds expectations in every category. Her attendance record was perfect until 3 months ago, when her son had been hospitalized for an asthma attack. She'd missed 2 days of work and had been written up for it despite providing hospital documentation. There were 3 supervisor position applications in her file, all denied. The reasons given were vague. Insufficient leadership qualities, needs more development, other candidates more suitable. David took photos of everything with his phone. He might be the CEO, but he knew how corporate politics worked. People would try to cover this up if they could. He needed documentation. At 10 o'clock, his conference room was full. The HR director, the head of legal, the VP of operations, and several other executives sat around the table looking confused and slightly nervous. David walked in wearing jeans and a wrinkled button-down shirt. He hadn't bothered changing. "Thank you all for coming on short notice," David began. He picked up the remote and turned on the projector. The first slide was a photo he'd taken with his phone. The warehouse break room with its flickering lights and ancient microwave. "For the past 2 weeks, I've been working undercover as a janitor at our Maple Street warehouse. What I discovered has fundamentally changed my understanding of this company and my role as CEO." The room was dead silent. "We are failing our employees. Not just failing them a little bit, but failing them catastrophically. And it's not because of some unavoidable market forces or economic pressures. It's because of choices we've made. Choices I've made." He clicked to the next slide. Wage comparisons showing how warehouse workers' real income had decreased over 3 years. "We pay our warehouse workers poverty wages. A full-time employee at our company cannot afford a 1-bedroom apartment in the cities where we operate. They can't afford basic health care. They can't afford to fix their cars when they break down. I met workers who skip meals to save money. Workers who live in their cars. Workers who work 60-hour weeks and still can't make ends meet." Click. A slide showing the benefits programs that existed but that nobody used. "We have excellent benefits programs that I approved years ago. Emergency loans, tuition assistance, transportation help. But they're so buried in bureaucracy and so poorly communicated that less than 2% of warehouse workers even know they exist. We're giving ourselves credit for having these programs while ensuring that nobody can actually access them." Click. The promotion statistics. "We systematically deny promotions to single mothers. The data is clear. A single mother working at our warehouse has almost no chance of advancement regardless of her performance. I have documented evidence of our warehouse manager explicitly stating that he won't promote women with children because he considers them unreliable." The HR director, Patricia, went pale. "Mr. Chen, if that's true, that's clear discrimination. We could face serious legal—" "I don't care about the legal exposure right now, Patricia. I care that it's wrong. I care that we're treating good employees like they're disposable. I care that a woman passed out from hunger last night while working in our warehouse because she couldn't afford food after buying her son's asthma medicine." The room was so quiet David could hear the air conditioning humming. "Here's what's going to happen," David continued. Effective immediately, we're raising the minimum wage for all warehouse workers to $15 an hour. That's a significant increase, and yes, it will impact our margins. I don't care. David, that's going to cost us millions annually, the CFO started. Then it costs us millions. We'll find it in the budget. Maybe we'll reduce executive bonuses this year. Maybe I'll take a pay cut. I make enough money. He clicked to the next slide. We're simplifying the benefits programs. 1-page applications, 48-hour approval process. And we're going to actually tell people these programs exist. Posters in every break room. Information sessions during shifts. We're going to make it easy for people to get help when they need it. Click. We're implementing real parental leave, 2 weeks paid minimum, for any employee regardless of position. We're adding sick days that can be used for children's illnesses without penalty. We're installing a proper HVAC system in every warehouse. Click. And we're conducting a full review of all management personnel at the warehouse level. Anyone found to be discriminating against employees or playing favorites will be terminated. No warnings, no second chances. This behavior will not be tolerated. The VP of Operations cleared his throat. David, I understand you're upset about what you saw, but we need to think about this carefully. These are massive changes that could disrupt our operations. Our operations are already disrupted. We have 60% annual turnover. We're spending a fortune constantly training new people. We have workers who are so demoralized they do the bare minimum. You want to talk about efficiency? There's nothing efficient about the system we have now. David sat down and looked at each person in the room. I'm not asking for your permission. I'm telling you what's going to happen. Your job is to figure out how to implement it. I want a detailed plan on my desk by end of business tomorrow. Questions? Patricia raised her hand tentatively. What about Rick Thompson? The warehouse manager you mentioned? I'll handle Rick personally. The meeting ended. People filed out looking shell-shocked. Linda came in after everyone left. That was intense. It needed to be. David rubbed his eyes. He was exhausted. Did you get Jennifer's information? I did. But Mr. Chen, you can't just show up at an employee's house. There are protocols. I'm not showing up as her CEO, I'm showing up as Mike, the janitor who's worried about his coworker. Linda looked skeptical but handed him a piece of paper with Jennifer's address. David drove to Jennifer's apartment. It was in an old building on the south side of the city. Peeling paint. Cracked sidewalk. The kind of place where people lived because they had no other choice. He knocked on the door of apartment 2B. No answer. He knocked again. Finally, the door opened a crack. Jennifer peered out looking surprised. Mike, what are you doing here? I wanted to make sure you were okay. After last night, she opened the door wider. How did you get my address? Good question. Mike, the janitor, wouldn't have access to that. David thought fast. I asked Pete for it. Told him I wanted to check on you. Jennifer didn't look convinced, but she was too tired to argue. I'm fine. Just a little embarrassed. Can I come in? Just for a minute. She hesitated, then stepped aside.